Luffy has one of the strongest devil fruits in the whole series. But have you ever wondered, what if Oda had given Luffy a strong race instead of an extremely powerful devil fruit? Would he still be able to become the king of the pirates? Or would he just fail at the first enemy he faces? Well, we're going to go through the 4 strongest races to see what exactly would happen. So after training with Garp, Ace, and Sabo, Fishman Luffy finally sets out to sea and absolutely crushes everyone who stands in his way with his raw fishman strength, and even beats the strongest pirate of the East Blue with far less effort. As we know from the anime, Jinbe beat the shit out of Arlong, even without using his karate. And this Luffy is a whale shark fishman just like Jinbe, so don't doubt his strength. The next enemy of Fishman Luffy is a Logia user, someone who almost killed the original Luffy. But Fishman Luffy beats Crocodile pretty easily since some of his attacks literally use water. So Crocodile didn't stand a chance against this version of Luffy. Moving on to Enel, another Logia user, but this time Fishman Luffy doesn't stand a chance. As we know, the original Luffy was able to survive lightning because he's made of rubber. But Fishman Luffy is cooked since lightning can affect fishmen. So the journey ends here. Alright, so back to the beginning. This time Luffy is born as a giant, and in this universe, he is the grandchild of Garp. The story gets pretty interesting when Dragon meets Luffy's mother. As we know, Dragon is the leader of the Revolutionary Army. When he learned that after Ohara was burned to ashes, some of the data saved by the scholars was still safe in Elbaf, so he went there. It was in Elbaf that he fell in love with a giant, but let's not go deeper into that for now. So after training with Garp, Ace, and Sabo, Luffy finally set out to sail. And not to forget, Luffy is still as reckless and dumb as he is in the anime. After defeating every enemy in East Blue with minimal efforts, the giant Luffy ran into some real trouble as soon as they entered the Grand Line. Because now giant Luffy has to face Crocodile, and since Luffy doesn't know Haki, he's at a big disadvantage. And he also might be easy target for Crocodile since he is so big. But let's assume giant Luffy somehow discovers that Crocodile's weakness is water and manages to defeat him. But then he has to face God Enel. So 2 races down to Luffy is still nowhere near becoming king of the pirates, let alone facing down to Yonko. But stay tuned, there's one race that could let Luffy speedrun to the One Piece. Okay, so back to the beginning. This time Luffy is born in a demon race similar to Kaido and Yamato's race. This version of Luffy is much stronger than his previous one. He now has more superhuman physical abilities such as strength, endurance, durability, and speed. But he still won't be able to escape Garp's love punch. Let's move on to his first opponent, Arlong. Well, let's just say it'll be an absolute breeze. But will he be able to beat Crocodile? As we know in the anime, Luffy discovered Crocodile's weakness when Crocodile's hand got wet from the water in the bottle hanging from Luffy's neck. Just like the original, Luffy eventually found out about Crocodile's weakness and beat him. Now, Luffy is up against God Enel. Previously, both the giant and fishman versions of Luffy didn't stand a chance against Enel, but not this time. As we know from the anime, Luffy struck Kaido with lightning multiple times and Kaido was still unfazed. And just like in the anime, when Enel tries to trap Luffy in gold, it turns out to be a big mistake. In the anime, when Luffy got stuck with the gold ball, he struggled a lot. But this time, Luffy is so strong that he uses the gold ball as a weapon and defeats Enel much earlier. Enel tries to use his final form to beat Luffy, but nothing works against Luffy because he's built different. Finally. So moving on to Luffy's next opponent, Kuzan. This time, Kuzan is only able to freeze Robin because Luffy easily breaks out of the ice. Kuzan doesn't bother anymore and just leaves. But when we get to Annie's lobby, it'd be a lot easier since Luffy is so strong that he easily matches Lucci's strength and gives him one hell of a beating. Moving forward, we know Luffy can also defeat Moria and Oars on Thriller Bark. But on Sabaody against the Pacifistas, yeah, they wouldn't be able to beat him either. But when the real Kuma arrives, Luffy doesn't stand a chance against him. Kuma is able to teleport Luffy because the rest of the crew is already gone while Luffy is busy dealing with the Pacifistas. Luffy is so distressed that he kind of let it happen. But the real trouble starts now because Luffy wants to go to Impel Down to save Ace. As we know in the anime, Luffy was able to infiltrate Impel Down by hiding in heaven. But this time, Luffy is so big that he can't hide in heaven. However, Luffy has another mind-blowing plan. He asks Hancock to go with the Marines, and he will hang on to the warship. When Magellan and everyone are busy in level 6 with Boei Hancock, Luffy starts to intrude right from the main gate. However, Luffy eventually gets poisoned by Magellan, but Bon Clay somehow saves him, and now Luffy is jumping into Marine Force. Just like in the anime, Luffy manages to uncuff Ace. But when Akanu makes a nasty daddy joke, Ace goes back to fight him and rest his donut. However, when Akanu tries to attack Luffy, this time Luffy actually manages to avoid it, and then everyone escapes except for Whitebeard, who stays behind to hold off the 3 admirals while his children's escape. Now, this is where the story takes a huge turn. Luffy saved Ace, but now his motivation to get stronger is a lot less motivating. So the crew meets back up at Sabaody later, but unfortunately they are stopped by Sentomaru and Kizaru. I think that's where it might be the end for the Straw Hat crew. Alright, so far Luffy has only reached Sabaody and has yet to enter the New World. But we are moving on to the strongest race in One Piece, the Lunarian. And after training with Garp, Ace, and Sabo, he sets out to sea with an initial 100 million bounty. This time Garp's love punch doesn't work on Luffy for obvious reasons. Luffy wipes out East Blue in the Grand Line, but things get pretty rough when crew lands on Sabaody. Man, I can't even imagine those celestial dragons surviving a full-on punch from Lunarian Luffy. Now, you might think that this time Kuma definitely fails to teleport Luffy and the crew, because Lunarian Luffy easily defeats all the Pacifista. Well, not exactly. This time, the government sends more Pacifista because they know how strong Lunarian Luffy is. So while Luffy is busy fighting the Pacifista and Sentomaru, Kuma teleports the whole crew. As the rest of the crew is already gone, Luffy becomes so distressed that Kuma easily teleports him. Remember, Lunarian Luffy is physically super super strong, but mentally, he's just like the original Luffy. Now, Luffy knows about Ace's execution, so this time, instead of taking help from Boa Hancock, Luffy just flies to impel down while thinking about how he should sneak inside. But Luffy chooses the hard way. He just enters through the front gate. Now, he has to face Magellan and a bunch of Marines. We know Lunarians have crazy endurance, but we can't say if they can survive Magellan's poison. However, let's assume Luffy, being the impulsive person he is, fires off of his back to gain more speed so he can save Ace faster. But as we know, when a Lunarian's signature durability is lost while the flame on their back goes out, Magellan catches Luffy off guard and poisons him, throwing him to the lowest level of Impel Down. But somehow, he survives with the help of Bon Clay. Now, everyone is escaping from Impel Down, and Bon Clay doesn't have to stay behind to open the gates because Luffy can just fly straight to Marineford. While everyone is busy fighting, Luffy flies directly toward Ace to save him. And guess what? He saves him and takes him away. Although Ace resists, saying he can't just leave his crew behind, Luffy doesn't listen and takes him away anyway. Now, talking about Whitebeard and his sons, Luffy saved Ace too early, so at this point, even Whitebeard hasn't entered the battlefield yet. As a result, the Marines and Whitebeard pirates no longer have any reason to fight, so they just leave Marineford. And yeah, Whitebeard causes some damage to the Marines while they retreat. And you guessed it right, Blackbeard doesn't get Whitebeard's devil fruit in this story. Now, this is where the story takes a huge turn. Luffy saved Ace, but now his motivation to get stronger is a lot less motivating. The crew meets again at Sabaody later, and they once again have to face Kizaru and the Pacifistas. While Rayleigh keeps Kizaru busy in battle, Luffy has to face Senamaru and a whole bunch of Pacifistas far more than the first time because of what Luffy did at Marineford. The world government isn't going to let that slide so easily. Now, there seems to be no way for Luffy and his crew to escape, but surprisingly, the real Kuma appears. You might wonder how Kuma can show up, considering he might have been fully modified by this time. However, before his modifications, Kuma asked Vegapunk to set 2 goals for him. First, to protect the Thousand Sunny until the Straw Hats return, and second, if by chance the Straw Hats do return, to teleport them back to the islands he initially sent them to. When Luffy sees the real Kuma teleporting the Pacifistas, he quickly gathers the whole crew and says, to escape from here, we have to let him teleport us. He also tells them we'll meet again after 2 years, so train during that time to become even stronger. The crew meets again after 2 years at Sabaody. This time they're far stronger than they were before. So let's see how far they can go in the new world. The crew sails into the new world, and the first opponent they face is Fishman Hordy. Lunarian Luffy easily beats the hell out of Hordy. At Punk Hazard, Luffy faces some trouble because he doesn't have long-range attacks to fight from a distance and avoid Caesar's poison and suffocating techniques. But eventually, he manages to beat him up. The crew's next destination is Dressrosa, where Luffy will face the Heavenly Demon. But since Luffy is a Lunarian, the Flamingo strings don't work on him, and Luffy eventually beats him with ease. After this, Sanji is kidnapped, so Luffy heads to Whole Cake Island. His first opponent there is Cracker. As we know, the original Luffy fought Cracker for almost 11 hours, but Lunarian Luffy defeats him pretty easily. Now, his next opponent is Katakuri. We know Katakuri is incredibly strong, but Lunarian Luffy's durability is on another level, so he eventually defeats Katakuri as well. Now it's time for the best fight, Luffy versus Kaido. Do you think Lunarian Luffy can beat Kaido without his extremely powerful Devil Fruit? Luffy has already learned advanced armament Haki, so it might be easier for him to fight Kaido. As you probably know, Kaido can see the future, use advanced grade armament Haki, and infuse Conqueror's Haki to deal damage to Luffy. But let's not forget that even King pointed out that his toughness surpasses that of other ancient Zoan users, including Kaido himself. Furthermore, his Lunarian durability was put to the test when Luffy, Lucci, Zoro, and Kaku couldn't even manage to scratch S-Hawk. I would say Lunarian Luffy would give Kaido a tough fight, but I'm not exactly sure how Luffy is going to beat him. For Gear 5 Luffy, it took a literal island-sized punch to defeat Kaido, and I don't think a Lunarian Luffy's advanced armament Haki punches would be enough. So I think this might be the end for the Straw Hats unless some plot armor saves him. Let me know what kind of plot armor could save Luffy. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.